Hello and good evening to you. Welcome to Ghana Tonight. It's the most authoritative news analysis program as we end the day this evening. On Ghana Tonight, in the next 60 minutes, these are the three issues going to be concentrating on: the controversy surrounding the embattled Dom Kwabenya Member of Parliament, Sarah Adwoa Safo, whether or not her seat should be declared vacant, still rages on as the majority and minority sides of the Privileges Committee of Parliament are divided on the matter. Stay with us on Ghana Politics. Tonight, we tell you the inside story and what the experts say is the way forward. Also on Ghana Governance tonight, the CDD's Afro Barometer Survey Corruption Perception Report cites the Ghana Police Service and the Presidency among the top most corrupt institutions in Ghana. What are the implications for good governance, especially for a government that came into office on the promise to fight corruption? We have the Executive Director of CDD, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, speaking to us exclusively tonight. Also on the show this evening, the potential of the Supreme Court justices swelling to 18 as President Kufuor nominates 4 justices to be appointed to the Supreme Court. Now, on this show, we ask questions if it's about time we capped the number of justices to 15 as was recommended by the Constitutional Review Committee. This is a question that at this moment we're going to be talking about in the next 60 minutes. Stay with us here. This is Ghana Tonight. Remember, we're live on TV3Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. My name is Alfred Okanse. We are very, very interactive this evening, so stay with us, connect with us, let's hear from you. But let's settle for Ghana Briefs this evening. Well, the majority in Parliament won the seat of the Dom Kwabenya Member of Parliament, Sarah Adwoa Safo, declared vacant in a report cited by TV3 after a Privileges Committee sitting on her absence from Parliament for more than 15 days without permission. TV3's parliamentary correspondent, Komala Kluche, who has seen the report, says it is consistent with the posture of the majority side since the absentee controversy broke. Now, the minority MPs on the committee, however, argued that according to the principles of natural justice, the seat should not be declared vacant because Adwoa Safo did not provide her side of the issue to the committee. Now, the committee, however, is determined, we understand, that the excuse from her 2 other colleagues, that's Kennedy Japan and Harry Korte, for the absenting themselves were reasonable. Now, on this issue, we're also going to delve into is the police and the office of president, that's the presidency occupied by President Kufuor now, have been ranked among the most corrupt institutions in Ghana by the CDD's Afro Barometer Survey, round 9. Now, the presidency comes in second place after the police on the ranking conducted annually by the Center for Democratic Development, CDD. Now, this comes only a week after a corruption survey by the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice Charge cited the police as the most corrupt institution. Executive Director of the CDD, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, says the Afro Barometer is a reflection of the ordinary Ghanaians' view of the situation on the ground.
For the average citizen, democracy has value only in terms of the results that it delivers, or primarily in terms of the results that it delivers. So if you have that kind of electorate who see democracy in instrumental terms, in terms of what it is that it can deliver in dividends, then to the extent that the dividends that the average citizen expects democracy to deliver are failing to materialize, to the extent that those dividends are not being delivered, we ought to be worried, right? So if you come to democracy with this idea that, and yes, there are some Ghanaians who, I think a good number of Ghanaians, who know.
I'll tell you what, stay with me. We're going to give you the full details of this exclusive interview with Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh on the Afrobarometer survey on corruption, trust for institutions, as well as issues related to leadership. Stay with me. We're going to get into it. Extremely important. But head of the Atta Mills family and senior brother of the late former president, John Evans Atta Mills, Dr. Kadman Atta Mills, has sent a strong warning to the founder and CEO of the Atta Mills Institute, Koko Anyidoho, to stop using the late former president's name to promote himself and that of his paymasters. Now, he made the observation at John Evans Atta Mills commemorative lecture here in Accra.
There are his pictures everywhere, some quotations of him. His name doesn't appear in any of the quotations, except, of course, the logo of the Atta Mills Institute. I saw his grave. There his name appeared a little bit, except that it was spelled John Evans Atta Mills with a hyphen between the two, for somebody who claimed to know him very well, even though the person who has the name himself has never put a hyphen in that name. They used this so-called refurbishing to promote themselves, to promote their institute, and to promote their paymasters. That's not what FIFI stood for. In my capacity as the Ebusia Penyin of the Nkrumah Chirba Trida Nebusia, the family has decided that we will contact our solicitors to make sure that they explore all avenues to stop the Atta Mills Institute from operating. I would like Ghanaians to know that the so-called Atta Mills Institute is unauthorized. It is also unsanctioned. It is unappreciated, and it's most unwelcome.
Well, look, the coming days look very interesting on this particular issue. Stay with me, because we're going to be gauging the views of many people on this particular position that the Atta Mills family has taken and what the response of the Atta Mills Institute CEO will be in the coming days. But let's settle for the conversation this evening here on Ghana Tonight, and straight to Parliament, because earlier today we got wind of what is happening with the majority and the minority on the Privileges Committee of Parliament. Look, they are split on whether or not Adwoa Safo, Sarah Adwoa Safo, Member of Parliament for the Dom Kwabenya constituency, Gender Minister, should vacate her seat because of that specific law that mandates that should happen. I'm going to show you right now exactly what transpired today and what we do know in this report that has been laid before Parliament. In the coming days, Parliament will discuss it, but here's what we found out. According to our parliamentary correspondent, Komla Kloche, Sarah Adwoa Safo failed to take advantage of the numerous opportunities and facilities offered her to provide reasonable explanation, as captured in here, to the committee pursuant to Article 97(1)(c) of the 1992 Constitution and the Court of Appeal decision in the case of Professor Stephen Akweku-Azare versus the Attorney General and 3 others. The Dom Kwabenya seat is automatically vacant by operation of law. This is the majority side of the Privileges Committee. This is the position that they held, that based on what the law says, specifically, this should apply. That seat should be declared vacant. Now, this is what they said about Kennedy Japan and Henry Korte, because you recall, these are the 3 people who were referred to the Privileges Committee by the Speaker of Parliament. This is the committee's position on it. The Honorable Kennedy Japan and Henry Cottee admitted having absented themselves for more than the 15-sitting threshold. However, the explanations given by Honorable Kennedy Japan and Henry Cottee for being absent were found to be reasonable. That's what the law says, that if they appear before the Privileges Committee and the responses they give are reasonable to the committee would then take a decision whether to pardon them or to actually also have the law apply. Recall that there have been a number of instances the committee reached out to Sarah Adwoa Safo, but to no avail. That's what you see there. She's out of the jurisdiction. They sent her Zoom links, trying to get her to speak virtually, to be able to engage with the committee as to exactly what was happening. According to the committee, they say that they were not able to get, as per the two, that's Kennedy Japan and Henry Cottee appearing before them, Sarah Adwoa Safo did not take advantage of that particular advantage that was given to her. Now, let's connect to Zoom now. Dr. Rashid Draman is the Executive Director of the Africa Center for Parliamentary Affairs. Connect with me as well. We'll be joined shortly by Komla Kluche, who's a parliamentary correspondent, also connecting with me. Dr. Rashid Draman, thank you for your time. Good evening to you. Now, what we do know is that the two sides are split on whether or not this seat should be declared vacant. The majority side, as the NPP MPs of the Privileges Committee, say that they do not want, indeed, this particular position of natural justice to be considered. The law must apply. The minority MPs say no. Natural justice or the laws of nature must apply and she should be pardoned. What's your thoughts on this?
Thank you very much for having me, Alfred. You know, we've been following this story for a very long time. And on the face of it, you know, one would have thought that the NDC would be excited about the position of the majority side because, you know, that is going to reduce, if you like, at least for the time being, the numbers on the side of the majority. And then hopefully if they put up maybe a very good competition, that might be a chance for them to tilt the balance on the face of it. But the more you think about it and the posture being taken by the minority side, then you begin to realize that, you know, the realities of the hung parliament are playing out right in our faces. Because at this moment in time, I believe, I mean, when I analyze the situation and look at all the angles, I believe, you know, every decision that is taken in that house now is looked at from a balance of power kind of perspective. And, you know, for the sake of maybe our viewers, if you look at what's happening right now, you know, the absence of the Honorable Sarah Adwoa Safo, and then the fact that the Asinoff MP is not able to come to the House because of the Supreme Court injunction, you know, creates a situation where I think both sides are now almost at equal. And so if you have a situation where maybe she's kicked out of Parliament and there's a by-election, and the NDC, the MPP wins, then they are going to get the person permanently in the House. The person will not be absent from the jurisdiction like we currently have. And that tilts the balance a little bit. So I think I'm just going into the minds of the NDC and the minds of the MPP. So the MPP is pushing to get one of their own out. Naturally, they should be defending their own. The NDC is against it. And the only one kind of reasonable explanation might be what I've just said, Alfred.
Because then
trying to keep.
Indeed, because it raises a lot of interesting questions, really. Because if it's about the numbers, Dr. Rashid Draman, as you say, the NPP would, as expected, be rather protecting Adwoa Safo to not be expunged, as is her name, expunged from the role of Parliament as a member of Parliament. But it is the NDC that is rather now asking, in fact, pushing that she should not be expelled from Parliament. Now, I'm just getting to a point whether it's not going to be a risky path, rather, for the NPP to take, to rather want, per your explanation, the seat be declared vacant so that there will be a by-election for them to win and then have a substantive member of Parliament who will be attending the business of the House.
Two things here, Alfred. I think, first of all, you know, the reason why maybe the MPP is pushing for her to be expelled from Parliament is just to end the status quo, because so long as she's not expelled, that seat continues to be in her name. And then she's out of the country, so she cannot be present to vote. So if there's a critical matter right now, like the e-levy, and she doesn't come to vote, then, you know, the NDC might have an advantage, or they will be equal. But if they kick her out of Parliament right now, and there's a by-election, and maybe the MPP is reading the fact that this is a stronghold for them, they might win the seat, and the person will be present, and will be able to vote at all times when that is needed. But if Honorable Adwoa Safo is not expelled and she continues to be in the US, nobody can stand in her stead in the event of any critical vote. So that tilts the balance a little bit, or that gives some kind of equality. But assuming it's declared vacant and the MPP wins, then automatically they have somebody who will be present at all times, and that is to their advantage. So I'm just reading this from that kind of balance of power point of view.
Well, but this is going to go to the plenary. As we do know now, this report has been submitted and it will be debated on the floor. It will still come back to numbers. The NPP has a one-vote advantage over the NDC if things remain this way. Do you see this going through, or you rather also hastening on the side of caution as to what the position of some, for instance, NPP MPs will be on this?
Well, there's a lot at stake here, Alfred. My understanding, at least from following the proceedings in Parliament and visiting the House, is that, you know, one of the MPs is critically ill, and I don't know whether he has returned to Parliament. So assuming that maybe the person is still attending to treatment and he's not in Parliament, it means that, you know, together with Honorable Adwoa Safo's absence, the MPP has 136, right?
That's right.
And then you look at the NDC side. Currently, there's an injunction on the Asin North MP. That brings their number to 136, which means that we have a real hung Parliament. So that if you even need a simple majority and the NDC side decides that, look, none of them is going to support that motion to remove her, support the report of the Privileges Committee, then the MPP loses the vote. Because if you are 136, and you need a simple majority, at least you need one or two people to move from the NDC side to join the MPP.
Indeed.
So we are going to have, if you like, maybe this is going to go down just like some of the issues that we have seen in the past. And to add to it, assuming the Right Honorable Speaker, for instance, is out of the jurisdiction on that particular day,
then it means that you would have some numerical disadvantage on the part of the
Yes,
MPP as well.
Exactly. And then let's pray that
Right.
maybe that's not the case. And if that should be the case, let's pray that we don't get a fight like we have seen in previous instances.
Dr. Rashid Oman,
I think that is
yeah.
what is at play now, and that is what, in my view, at least reading the situation, which is, bizarre, because you would have thought that the minority side should be calling for the head of this honorable MP. Rather, it's the other way around.
I'm going to hold you on a bit, and Komla Kloche, who's a parliamentary correspondent, is connecting with me as well. Komla, good evening to you. Now, you've been in Parliament the whole day and interacting with some members of the Privileges Committee of Parliament that we got this exclusive detail about what's happening and their recommendations in this particular report. Talking to them on both sides, what's their posture, their sense going into the plenary conversation about Adwoa Safo in the coming days?
Split and decided on the political lines like we have always known. And if you actually read the report we have intercepted very carefully, you will tell where the minority lies and where the majority lies. For the majority, and this also coming in the back of that interview that the chairman of the committee, Jose Owusu, granted to a sister media house, where he was asking that the seat be declared vacant. And just a day after that, the ranking member, Kweku Rekithagen, had gone ahead to say that the chairman, Somotu, could not say that because he was also not part of the deliberations that they have had. As far as they were concerned as a minority, the committee had not taken any decision regarding this. If you read the report very carefully, it tells you, and just some few weeks ago I had said it, that the minority will go all out and give every support there is to Sarah Adwoa Safo, because it does appear, if you listen also or you read carefully, the reason why they are not supporting the move for a declaration of a seat as vacant, they're saying that it's just fair that, yes, whichever way there is that will come, Parliament must make time and take the reasons to which she has absented herself. Opportunities have been granted her. I am aware that even a Zoom link was made available to her at the committee level, but she did not show up. But on the side of all of this, I can tell you that a good number of the minority MPs have also been having conversations with her. She appears, from what I gather from my sources, she appears to equally stand by the concerns that the minority have expressed, that yes, indeed, she needs to be given a fair opportunity to express whatever the reason may be to which she has not made herself available to attend upon the House. But as to when that is going to happen, we are unaware. Look, the majority does not consider her again, if you like, a member of theirs. Right. Look, if you listen to the comments by the chairman of the committee and other members on the majority side, it's so clear that it's a foregone conclusion that the her seat is actually a vacant one as we speak. Because if they've been able to pass the e-levy, they've been able to do other things without her, and she was not available, then it means that going forward, they cannot rely on her. Every opportunity, according to the majority MPs who have been speaking, of course, the report has been late. The House as a whole is yet to actually take the report. They will be rising on Thursday. Whether it's tomorrow or it's Thursday that they are going to take it, it's also another matter altogether. But the Speaker has to speak. The Speaker is in the jurisdiction. The Speaker will be seated. If it means that this would have to be put to a vote, which ordinarily is what happens when it comes to committee reports, But if you listen to the wordings of this particular one quite carefully, they are saying that the seat should be declared vacant per the Supreme Court ruling, which they have cited in their report. They said she's had sufficient notice has been explored. They gave her all the opportunity there is, but that hasn't been done. So what it means is that for the majority side, and no wonder this is a split one. And I'm actually expecting that this could actually bring some further controversies in the House going forward.
And fantastic. And getting to know that they're rising on Thursday, that's actually another point to watch. But Dr. Rashid Rahman, finally, before I let you go, considering the fact that they're going on recess on Thursday, and we're also picking information indicating by his aide that she's going to be coming in this week, how is the coming days going to look like for you from where you sit?
Well, it's going to be very interesting to watch. This is going to be a very critical vote. And I don't know whether, as Komla was saying, the report, will be laid before they rise. Because, look, where I am currently, I'm on a parliamentary mission. And it's an international parliamentary conference. And there are a lot of, at least there are about 5, 6, Ghanaian MPs here with me. A few of them from the minority, I think, and more from the majority side. And I believe there are others in other places. All these are going to be taken into account. And this delegation that I am with here is not returning before Parliament rises. So the coming days are going to be very interesting, Alfred.
And this delegation from both sides of the House, majority, minority?
Yes, but like I said, there are more majority side MPs than minority side.
Dr. Rashid Rahman, thank you so much for your time this evening. Dr. Rashid Rahman is connecting with us outside of the jurisdiction, indicated that, yes, there are some members of Parliament from both sides of the House who are with him there. And then also Komla Kluche, a parliamentary correspondent who is there for us. Is something we're going to be watching closely, because we're also picking reports that her aide says that she's going to be in town within this week. We'll see how the coming days will look like ahead of that recess on Thursday. But also, what we're moving into now is matters of corruption right after this quick break, because Parliament is captured in there in the CDD Afrobarometer survey that ranks the top most perceived corrupt institutions in this country, both institutional corruption and political corruption, and then also the trust in leadership. Stay with me. I'm going to get into the details of that particular report and why we should all be concerned. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to Ghana Tonight. We're live on TV3 Ghana on Facebook, DSTV channel 279, all across the world on 3news.com. Now, the police and the Office of the President have been ranked amongst the most corrupt institutions in Ghana by the CDD Afrobarometer survey. That's round 9. The presidency comes in second place after the police on the ranking conducted annually. I'm going to just take a look at this right behind me here. And it ranks about 16 institutions. I'm going to get into it. And this comes only a week after a corruption survey by the Commission for the Human Rights Administrative Justice in there. That's what you have on the screen. The police tops with the perception of those who believe that the police is corrupt, 65%, followed by the Office of the President, members of Parliament, 3, judges and magistrates, 4. Now, tax officials, Electoral Commission, civil servants, MMDCEs, business executives, assemblymen and women, traditional leaders, religious leaders, public media. Private media is last but one, and then non-governmental organizations is the next. These are the institutions that were ranked in terms of this particular survey. The police presidency, members of parliament. The next is whether Ghanaians who responded to this survey support democracy and reject authoritarian alternatives. 89% of the respondents say yes, they are for democracy. But let's go to the next, because even though there are many people who endorse democracy as a way to go, the extent of satisfaction with democracy is also dwindling over time. If you look at what's happening in 2019, about 70 people were satisfied with the offerings of democracy. But in 2022, this survey says 61% of the respondents. So it is declining in terms of the confidence that people have in democracy to be able to meet the expectations of the needs of people as well. Now, the ratings of the leadership performance, and this is one of the key highlights of this survey. I'll take a look at this. You can describe this as the approval ratings of the president. It dropped 70%, and then that's those who disapprove strongly of the president's performance, and 30% say they approve of the president's performance. That is one of the highest we've seen over the period. Members of parliament strongly disapprove, 71%. The respondents say that members of parliament are not performing well in the interest of the people. Assemblymen and women also 61% thereabout. And take a look at what's happening with the presidency. And this is the issues with the trust in institutions. The Ghana Armed Forces came tops in terms of the respondents' indication of institutions they trust. The courts came number 2. The president took the presidency in terms of the analysis. In 2012, trust for the presidency was 56%. In 2014, it dropped to 41%. In 2017, this was when this particular administration was in power for the first year, 73%. It dropped in 2019 to 58%. Now, in 2022, the trust for the presidency has dropped to 32%. That is the percentage change of about 25% between 2019 and 2022. That's the margin of the drop in the trust in the presidency to deliver on their promises. Now, take a look at this. I'm comparing the Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, that's a SHRAJ report that was released last week that tried to measure actual corruption as against the CDD's Afrobarometer survey that measures perception about corruption. Now, the police came tops in the SHRAJ survey, same as the CDD. Immigration came second, but in the CDD case, the presidency, customs came third, members of parliament, in the case of the CDD, Lands Commission, and judges and magistrates, DVLA, tax officials. Now, what's happening is that we're looking at the institutional corruption and political corruption. Dr. Adwoa Safo is Director General, Internal Audit Agency. He connects with me on Zoom. We're going to get back that particular connection. But this is how worrying that the situation looks like and why there's a needed urgency to be able to address this particular development. Dr. Adwoa Safo, thank you for connecting with me now on Zoom. First of all, look at the trend, and that's what I tried to paint in there. Even though there are many who will say this is perception, perception is not formed in oblivion. It's either someone's expectations were not met or they've had some interaction with people who have had an instance of corruption or the other. How do you react to this?
Thank you very much. I think, yes, there's a thin difference between, or thin line between corruption, perception and reality. The survey report or results should get all of us worried, because if we have this as the perception of Ghanaians, then it means we have a lot of work to do. If you match this one as against the CDD report against the SHRAJ report, it seems to me that there is some similarities, even though the respondents may be different and the sample size may also be different. Whichever way you look at it, it is a very good information and input for policy making. It is a way of telling us that we should double our effort towards the fight against corruption. It also tells me that there are a lot of people who still do not understand the intricacies of corruption and its effect or impact on society. It also tells me that we need a lot more education and sensitization as well as awareness raising among the body politics of this country. So it throws out a lot of information that should be an input for policy making. But the bottom line is that it is a wake-up call for us to double our efforts towards eradicating corruption in our society.
Well, the survey does indicate that a lot of the respondents endorse democracy as a way of governance, but the confidence in democracy to meet the expectations is reducing. I mean, if you look at the directive principle of state policy in the 1992 Constitution, it states that the most secure democracy is that which is able to meet the basic needs of its people. So how secured is our democracy if it's not meeting the basic needs, which has informed the dwindling trust, as we have seen in this survey?
It will depend on the connection or the relationship between needs of the people and governance. Governance is expected to promote the welfare and well-being of the people. But again, if the governed fails to hold the duty bearers accountable by way of delivering on their mandates, then you can possibly agree with me that democracy will not work to achieve the expected development. That is why I was saying that, look, we need to do further education and sensitization, especially if you put the question to the average Ghanaian, what do parliaments do? Whereas many people think that MPs are development agents, a few minority in society, enlightened ones, think that parliament are supposed to make laws. But what parliament are supposed to do under the constitution is slightly or materially different from what parliamentarians do on the ground and the expectations of parliamentarians. If you ask somebody what the president does, the person thinks that the president is expected to rule the country. So there is a big disconnect between society's expectation of their political leaders in a democratic system as against what the democracy we are practicing presents to the people, even though the expected standard is that democracy must lead to development. So that big disconnect would have to be closed to the extent that people vote without even being mindful of the manifestos. People vote, and some people think that they need to be rewarded before they go to vote, so they don't expect anything. People vote by expecting that, look, once I vote to my MP goes to parliament, and my MP acts in my best interest. People think that MPs should not even come back to them and consult them before they vote on the floor of parliament. A situation where you have people go to parliament and they are whipped in line to vote according to the expectation of a political party, not expectation of the constituents. It means there is something fundamentally wrong with our democracy. There is a big disconnect between expectations, situation on the ground, and what is required in law as far as our democracy is concerned.
So on the bit of corruption, this survey measured the trust in both institutional leadership and political leadership to fight corruption. And that's where we saw the police come first, the presidency follows. And leadership is everything. So if the confidence in the leadership of the political side and institutions to fight corruption is not there, then how can we win this fight?
I believe we can win the fight against corruption. We can win it if the leaders and the institutions send a strong signal that they are for the citizens. We can win the fight against corruption when we create, confidence is earned. You don't command it. And I think it will depend on the actions and inactions of these institutions and leaders to send a strong signal to citizens that we're fighting corruption. It is both ways, because if citizens also come to appreciate that corruption is a canker, it affects society, they will not indulge in corruption. Because how can corruption occur? Corruption, both the giver and the receiver are guilty. And these same citizens are the ones who would be prepared to part with something to facilitate public service delivery. So it's a two-way affair. I am of the view that we had a public sector reform program. We should be able to reform our public service to ensure that, look, people must understand that public officers are paid to render services. They are not supposed to give any additional reward. Public servants must be made to understand that you are supposed to render the best of services. When people decide to violate the corruption laws of this country, irrespective of who you are, we should deal with you according to law. Once we are able to apply the corruption laws of this country, that strong signal will be sent to the citizens, and that trust and confidence.
It is the commitment to and the political will to actually implement these laws that's not there. And you are the executive director of the Internal Audit Agency. I mean, if you conduct an audit and you make recommendations, and then your recommendations for punitive measures to be applied is not implemented, your work obviously is not done.
Yes, but you see, it's when you conduct an audit and people who are supposed to implement the recommendations are not implementing. There is another level where those who are supposed to implement but fail to implement would have to be sanctioned. Right. So again, it boils down to applying the law, and that is why I am of the view that look, the position of Attorney General must be separated from the Minister of Justice. Until and unless we separate this position, it will be difficult for us to fight corruption. Secondly, I also think that we should resource state institutions that are responsible for fighting corruption.
Right.
But the bottom line basically is that citizens must be made, awareness must be raised as to the harmful effect of corruption, because it is these same citizens who would go and pay money for things to be done. They will come back and say that institutions are corrupt. There are all kinds of things in the system, but let us all tackle it, because the responsibility is not on only politicians, but it's on all of us.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. Dr. Adwoa Safo is the Director General of the Institute of Audit Agency. Now, let's stay a bit further on this. Executive Director for the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Professor H. Kwesi Prempeh, has described as worrying the downward trend in governance performance and also the trust in the presidency to fight corruption. I sat with him for this exclusive interview. Take a look.
The details of this Afrobarometer survey indicates that, yes, the Ghanaian people prefer democracy as a way of governance, but the confidence in the democracy to meet the basic needs and expectations of the people has dwindled. I mean, so how worrying or threatening is this?
No, I think it's important to put this in a certain historical context. That, you know, first of all, Afrobarometer speaks to the ordinary citizen, right? We are not looking at democracy from the point of view of democracy scholars or democracy theorists or those who believe that democracy is an inherent good. Right? There's some school of thoughts, and some of us share that view, that regardless of the outcome that it produces, a system of government that allows people to choose their own leaders periodically through elections and stuff like that is an inherent good. The average Ghanaian, and I think the average African, does not necessarily share that view of democracy. What that means is that for the average citizen, democracy has value only in terms of the results that it delivers, or primarily in terms of the results that it delivers. So if you have that kind of electorate who see democracy in instrumental terms, in terms of what it is that it can deliver in dividends, then to the extent that the dividends that the average citizen expects democracy to deliver are failing to materialize, to the extent that those dividends are not being delivered, we ought to be worried, right? So if you come to democracy with this idea that, you know, and yes, there are some Ghanaians who, I think a good number of Ghanaians, who know where we have come from, and they look at our democracy since 1993, they compare it to the past and say, at least I have freedom of speech, at least I have certain freedoms that in the past I did not have, right? So for them, yes, those intangibles still matter. But there are a large number of Ghanaians for whom the value of democracy comes to them, for them, in the opportunity they believe it provides for life to be better. That when you choose your leader and you choose your government, and when you have the power to deselect that government through elections, for them, what makes that useful is that they get the government that they think will respond to their needs. So when, in spite of that opportunity, life doesn't appear to change much for you, that disillusionment, that dissatisfaction, that disappointment can actually pose a danger, as you rightly put it, to the very survival of the democratic project we are embarked upon. So we are worried. We at CDD and at Afro-Barometer, certainly when we see the trends sliding in terms of dissatisfaction, fortunately for us, the support for democracy continues to hold high, even though that also is a bit, it's tapering off a bit. But we continue to prefer democracy to all its authoritarian alternatives. We continue to prefer democracy to one-party rule. We continue to prefer democracy to military rule. That is positive. But as you rightly observed, we are seeing more and more that people are getting more and more dissatisfied with the results they are getting from democracy. And if you put the conversation in a bigger scale, these days you follow social media conversation, not just in Ghana, but across Africa among the youth. You see that we are getting seduced into alternative thinking, imagining alternative to democracy. Kagame is quite a popular figure, and people look at Rwanda and say, hey, they may not be nearly as democratic as we are, but at least something is happening there that is not happening here, right? So people are looking at democracy and they are thinking, well, if that's all it is, if it's going to vote for elections every 4 years and recycling of the same kinds of elites, and the only people whose lives are seeing an upward trend are the worker class and politicians and foot soldiers, then what's in it for me?
So it's just become more of a process of electing leaders. The only benefit is you just go and take part in an election. Then after the election, you surrender your sovereignty to the people who are elected. You surrender your resources in taxes for them to lead. And then also you continue to pay them in office because they are employees, as was captured in there. You see the posture of leadership towards some of these surveys, and they always say it's perception, and so there's no realism to it. They will question methodology. How has that also contributed to the deepening canker that we see at the moment?
Fortunately for us, basically Afro-Barometer is not an outlier. Afro-Barometer is not this voice in the wilderness, just screaming itself hoarse, just saying things that nobody else is connecting to. What we say, what we gather in Afro-Barometer is basically resonating in any other places. We have anecdotal evidence. Even the radio stations, when you listen to them, that's not where we source our data. But at least even the very shrill voices from callers and stuff like that, they validate some of the things that we find. And it is not, in my view, it is not entirely coincidental that the same time as we're seeing this huge dip in public dissatisfaction, this huge dip in trust in institutions, our economy is also going in the same direction, and now we find ourselves with in the IMF back again. So these things actually, I like the point that one of my colleagues, Osnakwapon, made on the panel, that Afro-Barometer data, we triangulate it with other sources of data, right? We don't just look at Afro-Barometer. Afro-Barometer is here. Somebody else does a survey, somebody else publishes some others, and they're all singing the same tune, they're all pointing in the same direction. So it's not this one data point that is saying this. Everybody else who is collecting data around this time, and even those who are not counting on quantitative data but are just doing qualitative research, the current literature coming out on Ghana is saying the same thing. Even if you read Bloomberg, whatever it is that you're reading, everything is singing the same voice, right? So I think it's important for leaders to pay attention.
Everything rises and falls on leadership. So if this survey details anything to go by, that the people's trust for the presidency has fallen drastically, and the institutional corruption as well, and the trust for those leaders in the institutions has also fallen. How can leadership then lead the fight against corruption if we can't trust them that much?
It is the biggest finding from this year's survey. I mean, when I first saw the raw data, before we basically cleaned it and analyzed it, I was a bit surprised just at the huge dip in public trust and support for certain institutions and public offices, including the presidency. And it's not a good thing when the places within the constitutional and political system where power is lodged for finding solutions to problems, power is lodged for transforming the system, for changing the system. When those same places are the ones enjoying the least trust, then you ask yourself, if citizens feel this much despair, what then? Because if the places you are going to go to for solutions is the places where you have invested your trust, your mandate, your hope, are also places where you don't think you can get results, where else are you going to go? And for those of us who look at democracy in this way, it's worrisome. It's deeply worrisome because then citizens will then do what? They turn to vigilante, they turn to other forms of self-help. Because if you're not going to go to your representative that you elected, if you don't want to go to your MP, your assemblyman, if the president is not the one you're going to go, if you don't trust the courts, where do you turn? Because people will have to live their lives and they would look for alternatives outside of these more legitimate sources of power, of solutions to problems. So that worries us deeply. That worries us a great deal.
Yes, but it's political corruption. And that's what it was captured in the survey, the political leadership and the lack of trust in there for them to actually be the leaders in the fight against corruption, and the institutional corruption as well, where we've seen consistently the Ghana Police Service has been leading these surveys. Recently, the Ghana Fiscal Service one, and then what has just come through from you as well, as the #1 most perceived corrupt institution. And in the case of Ghana Fiscal Service, there was some reality to it as well. How does both the political and institutional leadership reform the processes to win this fight against corruption?
On the police side, certainly, the thing about the police, it's easy to trivialize it and say the amounts are small. But the thing about the police is that it is the citizens, not only the citizens' first encounter, but almost everybody who comes to the country, their first and most frequent encounter with the state is through a police officer. The state is not, the state is embodied in some human form. And for most people, that human form is the police, right? So how you view the police shapes your encounter and your perception of the state as a whole. If the state is seen as legitimate, if the state is seen as disorganized, disorderly, not behaving properly, we form those opinions from the way we see the police. So it's a very important institution. But some of us would tend to say, oh, but the police just one city, it's just one city. Actually, it's not. Because if you the frequency of the encounters, right? So if in a single day, you ply a particular road and you make 2 or 3 transactions with the police, and you do this, many times in a week, in the aggregate, the monies we are talking about are substantial. So this is almost like a tax, right? When I send Momo is 1.25 or 1.5, it may be just a drop in the bucket. It appears like it's just 1 CD something. But that, if the policeman collects that every day from everybody all over, that's a huge amount of money. But I think the other thing about corruption when it happens with the police is that the visibility of it also tends to normalize corruption, and it dulls our sense of reprehension about it. It becomes so normal, right? if you see that a person in official police uniform is collecting money, and it's almost advertised, you see it. By normalizing something like that, it tends to lower our guard, we become more accepting of it. So no, we don't think it's petty corruption. I mean that whole distinction no longer, for some of us, it no longer exists between petty and grand corruption. It no longer exists. But I think it also needs to be put in context that because we have more frequent encounters with the police, their corruption is more observable.
Well, that's Professor H. Kwesi-Pempeh, Executive Director of the Center for Democratic Development, CDD. They authored this Afrobarometer survey. So stay with us in the subsequent bulletins. Going to be doing a lot more analysis on this. But thank you very much for staying with us on Ghana Tonight. Make a date with us as well. Same time tomorrow at 10 p.m. On behalf of the rest of the team, we appreciate your company. And do have a good night.